Hello and welcome to Glenys Garnett Creative Images. Here's another video today. I'm going to be talking to you in this video about a technique that some of you may have heard of called the Pep Ventosa technique, and it's a guy in Barcelona, I think a photographer in Barcelona that sort of shot to fame with this. And the idea with the Pep Ventosa technique is that you will create a series of images, usually walking around a subject, and then combine them in Photoshop, and you produce this what looks like quite an impressionistic image. And people tend to use trees for Pep Ventosa, and that's usually a good starting point because you can usually do a 360-degree round on that. But you can use it for other subjects, so don't limit yourself to trees if you're going to do this sort of technique. You can do something similar in camera. If you've got I think a Canon or a Nikon that does up to, say, I think it's 9 exposures, but the technique really works best if you do probably a minimum of 10 to 15, possibly even more. I mean, I think Pep Ventosa does something like 200 sometimes in an image, which is probably beyond most of us here, and probably we've not got enough memory to process that amount of image. But before we get started, I'm just going to show you a couple of different images that you can do just by way of difference. This is an image of a flower that I've put on a light pad. I've just put the flower on the light pad, I've sprinkled some petals around the outside, and then I've gone in 360 degrees around the image, and I've just taken a picture as I've gone round, and then I've merged them into Photoshop. And sorry about that. And a similar image here, done the same, just pop a flower in the middle, and actually this was flowers around the outside. I think they were decaying flowers around the outside, and I've gone round and created an image from that. And this is an image of an urn I found on one of my walks, and this was about an 180-degree turn, so I started at this end, got some nice petunias and roses on the side, and I've walked around about 180 degrees on that. I think I took about 15 images for that. So it just gives you some idea that you don't have to just use it on trees and things that you want to be in the middle. The key to taking the images in something like this is that you must keep the subject in the same point in the frame when you're taking the images. So obviously a tree trunk is ideal for that. You can put that in the middle of your frame, and you can walk around and make sure it's in the middle of the frame as you go around. You may have to make some adjustments in Photoshop as you do that. But you can see this is one I've done earlier, which is a lovely rowan tree. And I don't often stop there, as you probably know with some of my images. I will go a little step further. And this is what I ended up with in terms of the final image that I did afterwards, which is quite a nice bright, lots of paint splattered on there and a few textures. But what we're going to do is we're going to combine this particular image. We're going to do it from scratch. I'm going to show you how that was built up. Now it won't be exactly the same. We'll go down here and we'll get the images up. Now what I would say is the first thing you've got to do, let's say, I can't remember, there's about 15 images in this. But what you've got to do is you've got to open up the images as a layers in Photoshop. Now, it's easy to do that in Lightroom, because if we go into Lightroom here, you can see you can select all the images. If I select all those, I've got those all selected in here. And if we then go to Edit and Open as Layers in Photoshop, it will go off and it will open all those layers, which is what I've done here. If you're opening straight into Photoshop, then obviously you've got to highlight all the images and then open as layers in Photoshop, whichever way you do that, maybe in Bridge or something like that. But what we've got here is we've got a series of images, and what you'll usually find is that they'll come into Photoshop, and you probably get the bottom of the stack will be the first image you took. and the top of the stack is the last image you. Sorry, I've got that the wrong way around. The top of the stack is the first image you took, and the bottom of the stack is the last image you took. But so what we want to do is reverse that. You can do it the other way, it's up to you, but it's purely personal. So what we're going to do is just to highlight the whole stack here, and then we're going to go to layer and come down to arrange, and we're going to reverse it. So now we've got the opposite way around. We've got the last image we took at the bottom, at the top, sorry, and the first one we took at the bottom. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch all these layers off. So I'm going to hit Alt and click on that bottom layer, and we switched all those layers off. So we've just got that first layer. Now, I'm just going to create a copy of that layer first, and I'll tell you for why when we get to the end of the image, but I'll keep a copy of that first image. Now, what we need to do is go through every layer, and as we go through each layer, we want to reduce the opacity to about, starting off with probably about 50%, 45%. It's up to you. Now, this technique is very much a look and feel. It's how you think the image looks, and you know whether the image needs a little less opacity or more. It's up to you, really. You get a feel for it as you go through it. So we're going to go through each of these, and we're going to, I've obviously already done that one. Sorry, I'm on the wrong one there. And we're going to reduce the opacity as we go, and we'll get a little bit of the layer underneath coming through, but still maintain some definition. And if we go too far, we're obviously losing that. So we just want to, and I tend to do this by look and feel rather than by, oh, it's got to be 50% opacity or 40% opacity. It's definitely a look and feel exercise. So I'm just going to go through these very quickly. I'd spend quite a bit more time doing this than I'm doing now. You could actually possibly create an action for this, which would set them all at something like 45%. So let's keep going, and there we go, we're getting something. What I would suggest as well before you import them is edit the images a little bit. Make sure that they're not underexposed or overexposed, so that you've got some decent exposed images when you're pulling them in. And that's easy to do in Lightroom, because you can just do one image and then synchronize the rest with the same exposure. Probably a little bit more difficult straight into Photoshop. So we're going through here, and we've nearly got to the end. This won't be perfect, but you get the idea. And we got the last one. Now, what I would normally do, what you may have to do as you go through with certain images, you might find that the trunk doesn't line up, so you might have to move the image a little bit. If we use the move tool, you can see the trunk there. We might have to lose. As it happens with this, it was easy to line up because I was able to sort of have a spot where I was focusing as I went round, and it was dead easy to do. Now, the reason I created this copy at the bottom was I quite like to have another a copy of the image that I can then move to the top of the layer, which is the original image I started with, and then I'll usually overlay that and bring the opacity down. So I've almost got the start image, and I have the start image at the beginning and the end. Now, this isn't perfect, but it just gives you an understanding of how the process works. And what we would do at this point then is we would flatten the image, and if we save it at that point, it will save it into Lightroom. If you come from Lightroom, it will save it into a Lightroom as an additional file in your catalogue, and you've got it there at the side of the original that you opened in the first place. If you brought it straight into Photoshop, then obviously just do a save or a save as, and save the image as a new PSD file. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to right mouse click, and we're just going to flatten the image. So we've got that image, and at this point you would save it or save as, whichever it is you want to do. And this is the point where you can make some adjustments, some fine adjustments to it. You might want to do this in Lightroom, or you can do it in Photoshop. It's up to you. You might want to do some adjustments on the lighting and so on and so forth. This is a little bit rough. In this case, I'll probably bring the vibrance up a little bit and a little bit of saturation, just get a little bit of saturation in there. And again, these are all your own personal things that you may want to do. And if we zoom in onto that, you can see we've got lots of underlaying layers and overlaying layers, and it can look quite impressionistic. And that's how you process a Pep Ventosa image. So hopefully you can go away, have a little play, try a few things yourself and see how you go, and then come back and pop them on the group and let's have a look at the results. Okay, bye bye.